Hi there, it's Michael Ackerman coming to you from Seattle, Washington, where I'm a realtor with Coldwell Banker Bain. Today's video blog is about reserve studies, and you might be thinking, what is a reserve study and why should I care about it? Well, if you are buying a condo and you're a buyer, you do want to pay attention to this, and if you're a seller selling a condo, you probably want to pay attention as well. What a reserve study is a study done on a condominium. A company comes in, a neutral third party who does reserve studies comes in and does a study or a report on the building, its current condition, what upcoming maintenance it's going to need over the next couple of years or for the life of the building. And then they look at the reserves, the amount of money that the homeowners association is taking in every month out of the homeowners dues and putting it into the reserve kitty so that when something does need to be done on the building, there's money in there to do it. They actually figure out how much money needs to be in reserves and how much will need to be in reserve for future upcoming assessments or projects or maintenance on the building. So if your dues aren't high enough to be collecting enough reserves, they suggest you upping those. So it's a really great way of having a neutral third party come and kind of organize the building into collecting enough reserves so there's enough money to spend on projects when they come up, rather than having each person come up with more money, which would be a special assessment. So a lot of buildings like to pay a little bit higher dues so that the reserves fund will be well funded, so that if a project does come up, they'll have enough money in there to do it. Now, in Washington state, it's now law that condominiums do need reserve studies, and a lot of lenders, as far as different loan programs, sometimes require that a reserve study be done on a building. Some buildings have done reserve studies here, some haven't. It's fairly costly. For some smaller buildings, it might be a little bit prohibitive, but it does, as far as money, but it does depend on the building. Every building really should do them. If you're a buyer and the building has not done a reserve study, don't think you cannot buy in that building just because they haven't done a reserve study. What you'll want to do, though, is look over the resale certificate to make sure that the reserves are fairly ample, and to see if the association has talked about doing a reserve study. And maybe if you buy in that building, you can get on the board and kind of nudge them toward doing a reserve study. If buildings have done a reserve study, that's great. It's important for you as a buyer to read that over. And make sure that everything is copacetic in the building. Now, if the building doesn't have enough reserves for future projects, but they're planning on upping the dues in the next couple of years, that's great. As long as they have a plan and they're aware of possible future, maintenance that needs to come up in a building, which every building has, that should make you feel very comfortable. As a seller, it's a great idea to kind of push the association and the other owners in your building to do a reserve study, because it not only allows you, or allows the property management company to release that information to the buyer's more educated and will probably feel better about buying the building. Again, certain loan programs aren't available unless you've done a reserve study, so if your building has done one, you will open yourself up to buyers in those type of loan programs where normally they wouldn't be able to buy in your building. Now, traditionally, reserve studies last 2 years, so you have to do them every couple of years. And I think it's a great idea for buildings to do reserve studies as far as condominiums go. So if you have any other questions, feel free to email me at michaelackerman@cvbain.com. And do remember, it's all about the connection.